Thank you so much for all of your support throughout the past couple of years, and for all the subscribers that have decided that they wanted to, subscribe to my videos. Now, there's a question that you guys have been asking for me to do for the past couple of years, and now I finally really feel that it's time to do it. You guys always ask me what my top 50 albums of all time were, and while I'm not going to do 50, I'm actually going to do 25. It's actually going to be a little bit different even still. I don't think any album is going to be past the year 2007 because I think it takes a couple of years in order for one of those albums to truly be solidified as one of the best of all time. You need to know whether or not it's going to hit you the same way in a couple of years as opposed to the first time that you listen to it. And also, this isn't the best albums of all time, it's my best albums of all time. These are ones that are able to add in the one thing that makes my reviews a little bit more unique, and that's my own personal emotion towards it. So, if you realize that there are some bands on here that you thought would be on this list, well, there you go. That's the reason why they may not be. So, with that said, let's get started, and I hope you have a snack, because this is going to take a while. First off, we're going to start off with number 25, which is Close to the Edge by Yes. Oh, progressive rock. During the 1970s, this was a genre that was just starting to bud and really take off. And Close to the Edge by Yes was definitely one of the cornerstone gems of Yes's early discography. From the very first track, which was the mammoth self-titled track, all the way on to Siberian Krytal, this was a disc that was just chock full of length. Not to mention also really took a lot of bends and turns, really kind of started to rewrite the rule book on progressive rock in general, just making it truly epic and giving this an environment that really just anything that you can think of doing, well, throw it in there. Now, ever since then, they have remastered it, and it's one of those things where they've included in some rare demos, and I think also they condensed one of the tracks down to just one little subsection. I think it was actually from Close to the Edge, and I think they called it America. But the reason why I'm kind of not sure about that is because I was able to find an original copy from a dude that was bringing it in used, so that's kind of a prize in my collection, and I'm really proud to own that. And I really love this album. Number 24 is The Sham Mirrors by Arcturus. Now, of course, Arcturus is a super group that's been able to blend black metal in with some avant-garde stylings and even just going and bending in a little bit of space rock in there as well. The Sham Mirrors is from the early part of the 2000s, and it really just showcased this band at their absolute peak. Really showcasing 7 tracks of just absolute lavish beauty, but at the same time also unbridled aggression, which is a nice duality effect. This is also one of those albums that you can't really just talk about one track, such as Radical Cuts or something like that. You have to actually talk about the album as a whole, and it's almost required listening to listen to this thing from front to back, because really there's no one track that really outshines the other. They're all pretty spectacular in scope. And also, this is one of the ICS Vortex projects that wasn't Dimmu Borgir that is absolutely amazing. While I do like ICS in Dimmu Borgir, and it sucks that he's gone because now Dimmu sucks, all the stuff that's outside of Dimmu is infinitely superior, Arcturus being a prime example. Number 23 is Colors by Between the Buried and Me. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is the latest album on this list from 2007. However, Between the Buried and Me is definitely worthy of this inclusion. This album is absolutely massive. Over 60 minutes in length for sure, not to mention just full of bends and breaks all along the way. Progressive metalcore is not even a good enough term for this. This is just flat out epic. Between the Buried and Me was always known as a band that was able to kind of mix in absolute chaos with remnants of beauty. And Colors was certainly the album that showcased this on a widespread, massive basis. Because if you consider their first couple of albums, there were no song lengths that could be considered to be drastically epic. However, with Colors, you got tracks that were spanning more than 10 minutes, and of course, White Walls, the amazing and triumphant finale, was clocking in at close to 15. They would get even longer with albums that followed, such as The Great Misdirect, but this was the original, not to mention, this blended in all sorts of different atmospheres, including something that sounded just like Demented Carnival. If you can make a carnival sound metal, then you're fucking amazing. Between the Buried and Me, you're fucking amazing. Number 22, Dreaming Neon Black by Nevermore. If there's one thing I've noticed about myself while constructing this list is that I seem to really have a knack for enjoying very personal and very emotionally heartfelt albums, and that is certainly one that is true in this case. The story is that Warrell Dane's girlfriend went missing and eventually was just assumed to be deceased, and this is the man's struggle of going through this loss while at the same time trying to wander through life in this surreal state of depression and unknowing. And of course, all of the different emotions that you experience during a situation like this start to come out, whether it be anger and rage with songs such as Poison God Machine, or just unknowing with the title track, Dreaming Neon Black. Overall, this is a balance of atmosphere and also one that is able to showcase that they are more than just a thrash metal band with melodic tendencies. They are instead a band that just has a lot to bring to the table. Number 21 is Metropolis 2 by Dream Theater. Now you might be thinking, why not something like Images and Words or A Change of Seasons? Why Metropolis 2? Why an album that is the sequel to a song? Well, why not? This album is also massive, much like I said for Between the Buried and Me's Colors. It is a landmark disc for this band's career. The overture alone is something that really showcases to you that it's going to be one heck of an album, mainly because it's taking that traditional stance of an opening number in a play. First they establish plot with the very first track, kind of setting you into the world, and then it hits you with this massive overture, and you're just transformed there. I love the fact that the musical atmosphere is able to put me in the setting, almost as though, in my imagination, I'm able to follow along with the story, because it's painted that vividly. Not to mention, this band is also able to showcase their highs and lows on this album, and tracks such as Beyond This Life, and then also Through Her Eyes. You take a look at and listen to those two tracks, then damn, what can I say? There's just so much that you can say. And then you listen to a track such as The Spirit Carries On, where it's asking those questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where do we go when we die? Something like that seems so incredibly simple, and for some people may seem really cheesy, but it's actually really powerful, considering those are the questions that, at one point or another, we do ask. Let's move on. Number 20 is Push Monkey's self-titled album, entitled Push Monkey. Now, this is from the latter part of the 1990s, and for an alternative band, it was pretty easy to get popular back then. But this is a band that somehow accomplished not to do that, or seemed to accomplish not doing so. This is a band that got a little bit of airplay around my area, which is kind of odd considering they're a Texas-based product, but with songs such as Caught My Mind, Ashtray Red, and Handslide, these are just, to name a few. I like the fact that this band was able to have a little bit of fun with their music with songs such as Spider, but at the same time also showcasing a more aggressive side on the aforementioned Ashtray Red, and then also really dialing it back and showcasing a little bit more of a heart, a little bit more of a soul, kind of a seductive little side with songs such as Limitless and Cut the Cord. I really like the variety on this release. It's really an underrated gem. If you can find it, definitely pick it up and check it out if you're a fan of alternative music. Number 19 is Pink Floyd's Animals. Now you would think with all the Pink Floyd stuff that I have that this would be higher up on the list, and there would be many Pink Floyd brothers and sisters on this list as well. Well, spoiler alert, this is the only one, and it's smack dab here at number 19. Animals will always be the quintessential Pink Floyd release for me. It's their most progressive rock-styled album out of all of them. And this was the one album that they really weren't bogged down by, themes of what's going on in the world today, themes of money and greed and power, themes of Syd Barrett, just to name a few. Instead, they were talking about Animal Farm, and I like it whenever bands are taking on projects such as this. And the funny thing is that whenever you consider the idea at first, making an album based around Animal Farm just doesn't exactly seem like it would be too appealing or enticing. Then you listen to the album. You hear Dogs for the very first time, and you're absolutely floored at just this huge atmosphere. And not to mention the style shift. From the upbringing of the lyrics to that dense middle section, back to kind of like what you would consider to be a reprise of the very first section. It's just an absolutely fantastic track. Not to mention, it makes 18 minutes in a car go by really, really fast. Number 18 is Relationship of Command by At the Drive-In. Now, many of you will know At the Drive-In by their two the two bands that actually followed because of this band, and that is Sparta and the Mars Volta. Prior to all that, they were at the Drive-In, and this was their last album. This is an album that also featured the Guitar Hero and minor radio hit One Arm Scissor, but that really is just kind of the preface of what this album is all about. Really showing a lot of elements of the post-hardcore sound, really taken to the extreme, not to mention adding in a little bit of that punk mentality and that punk speed, and then you thrust in just a little twinge of that avant-garde experimentation, that little twinge of progression, that little twinge of just social awareness with a song such as Invalid Litter Department, which was all about the Juarez tragedies. It's very, very interesting that this is an album that vocally was able to command so much attention, both in the yelling, the very loud environment, but then also commands everything whenever there are just whispers. Really just a fantastic release. Definitely one of the best albums of all time. If this were the best albums of all time, not my best, it would make that list too. Number 17, The Years of Decay by Overkill. Yeah, this is kind of an unsung hero for Overkill. It's one that I really love. In fact, I love it more than all of the other ones, which is going to probably scare some people and shock some people. The reason why is because this is the most unique Overkill album. It features a lot of heavy riffing, but it also is able to dial it back and incorporate more melody, incorporate a little bit more in the way of songcraft and building a really good song, as opposed to just thrashing your neck off for 3 to 5 minutes with some shredding guitar solos and things like that. This actually takes the time to build itself a little bit, which is a reason why this album sometimes can be misunderstood, or at the same time underappreciated. There's a lot of building blocks going on here, but that speed and aggression is still present with tracks such as Evil Never Dies. And then whenever you think of Playing with Spiders / Skull Crusher, 10-minute long Overkill song, damn, that's like heaven. Now, the song itself, The Years of Decay, a lot of people may find to be a little bit lame, but for me it's all about atmosphere, and this one builds actually a really, really grim one. In fact, one time whenever I was listening to this album and coming home from vacation, I constructed a whole entire music video for it, and it was pretty damn morbid, so it definitely is possible. Great album. If you haven't listened to this in a while, put it in and put your motherfucking horns up. Number 16, Storm of the Light's Bane by Dissection. Yeah, we're getting into some good old-fashioned black metal. This is a little bit more of the melodic black metal variety, and it's something that melodic side was showcased a lot more with their last record prior to their vocalist committing suicide, but at the same time, you have to understand, Storm of the Light's Bane was coming out in the middle of the 1990s, where this was really the heyday of black metal. And there is still, for a first-generation band, showcasing a lot of the genre staples. Even though they were able to incorporate a little bit more melody into their work, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that there's a little bit more melody in their work. Whoop-de-fucking shit. Songs like Where Dead Angels Lie are a perfect exhibition of this. They're able to blend amazingly grim and frostbitten atmospheres, but just have that little extra twinge. And that's something that I really like about this release. Number 15 is Monotheist by Celtic Frost. You want to talk about dark atmospheres? Tom and the boys basically crafted a record that felt like it was being forged in the depths of hell and was doing every bit of its power to try to drag you down in with it. Damn. With songs such as Ground or As Abysmi Valdeoth, My Domain of Decay, that's all that needs to be said. Avant-garde bliss as opposed to their traditional style. Very, very dark gothic styles mixed in with a very doom-laden atmosphere. Of course, the centerpiece of this album is the Synagogue Satanée, and it is just a ridiculously awesome long track on this release. And it's also one that, part of that I used as my introduction for my old blog TV show whenever I was doing that. And hey, we got Triptychon out of this, so damn, that's pretty awesome. Number 14, Prometheus, The Discipline of Fire and Demise by Emperor. This is their triumphant final release, and man, do we wish we could have them back, because this was an introspective journey that really just takes a lot of courage to make. And the reason for that is because while it does still maintain that black metal sound, and it does have a lot of those twinges that influence that darkness to it, it is also one that incorporates what some may consider to be some minor progression here and there, but it's really kind of all dependent upon the ear that you're listening to it. What I really liked the most about this was just how lavish the soundscapes were, just how built these atmospheres are, how in touch I felt with this album, and that is always a positive thing. You know, a lot of people will probably ask why not Anthems to the Welcome at Dusk. I just like this album a whole heck of a lot more, and Anthems is still a powerful release. It's probably one of those albums that would be technically on the outside looking in, but this is the one that really, I guess, won out. Not to mention, it was also one of my very, very first black metal styled albums, so hey, there's a little bit of sentimentality in there as well. Number 13, Cynic with Focus. Now, we see tech death, or, technical metal all the time now. We see jazz interwoven into it all the time now. First part of the 1990s, though, that wasn't quite as a typicality. Of course, we were still going through speed metal, and grunge was slowly starting to take over. Oh man, grunge, the killer of hair metal. Thank God. Anyways, with this album, though, Cynic really forged a pathway that didn't exactly pick up a lot of velocity until about a decade later. But this long sought after classic is just a mammoth of an album that really showcases this new style that was being done by just a couple of bands, such as Themselves and Atheist, and in a little bit more of a thrashier setting, Corner was also doing it as well. Overall, these were three bands that kind of forged the way for all these bands of today who are incorporating these different styles into their music as well. And I think that they kind of get a little bit snubbed as far as the appreciation level is concerned, except for bands that truly have a lot of great history in mind. I really think that a lot of the bands of today owe a great debt to them, and I think that it's something that should be appreciated a little more. And for those of them who maybe have never heard this album, they should definitely pop it in, because it's fantastic. Number 12, Judas Priest with Painkiller, the mighty Judas Priest, with their last album with Rob Halford in the first era. Painkiller is one of those classic albums of all time that really comes along once in a lifetime, because it's able to blend the fantastic voice that Rob Halford possesses, the absolute shred fest that this album is able to be for both guitar players, and also, the second half of this disc is just monumental. It almost feels like everything flows together so perfectly well. If I was a reviewer whenever this album came out, it would be really tough to top this for Album of the Year, because this album really has it stamped all over it. Chuck for Death even thinks that way, considering he covered Painkiller on The Sound of Perseverance. And his cover was also exquisite. I'm pretty sure Rob was very, very pleased with the end result. Number 11, Iron Maiden with Brave New World. Now, this is an album that has a lot of sentimentality for me because it was one of the first metal albums that I ever got. Not to mention, this was Bruce Dickinson's second time with the band, and that's just a fantastic thing for a lot of people. Mainly considering a lot of people didn't enjoy the Blaze Bayley era of Iron Maiden. Now, I for one didn't think it was all that bad. It was definitely better than the Ripper Owens era of Judas Priest to kind of cross-reference back. And Blaze Bayley actually has had quite the solid solo career, even though I just ripped his last album to shreds. But Brave New World was all about the band expanding to 6 members. It was all about Bruce Dickinson being back, and it was all about the songs getting a little bit more lengthy, but at the same time also having a lot more go on. With 6 members, there's a little bit more of a room for progression, and that's something that started to showcase itself a little bit here. Songs such as Dream of Mirrors, Ghost of the Navigator, and of course, The Wicker Man, which was a song that I saw the video for on VH1 a couple of times. So, Iron Maiden was definitely back in full force whenever this album was released, and it was definitely one of those bonding moments for my friend Rob and I, so it's definitely got that sentimental edge as well. Number 10, Blackwater Park by Opeth. That's wrong, because it's actually Still Life. That's a spoiler as well, mainly because of what I wrote down. Still Life by Opeth. For a long time there I said that Still Life was actually my number 1 album by the band, but after some careful consideration, it's actually number 2. What I did there, even though it was a little bit of an error, also kind of represents the way that those 2 albums really flip-flop for me. And really with Still Life, what it is the fact that this is the album that really started to show them ramping up and getting on a solid little plateau, that musical plateau I always like to talk about. My Arms, Your Hearse started to really establish that, but you can't exactly establish a plateau. You have to establish the rise to the plateau, and then the next album has to be the plateau. And then that can extend on for as long as necessary ad nauseum. Still Life also contains just some beautiful passages interwoven with the aggression, and it is once again a semi-conceptual album, one that has been debated kind of like Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche for a long time, and so this is definitely a hotbed quarry for a lot of controversy amongst fans, or just a lot of questions for what the plot is really supposed to entail. However, we do know that Melinda is certainly involved. Overall, this album is just beautiful. It's perfect in many, many ways, but there is, of course, Blackwater Park to consider, and we'll talk about that album a little bit later on. Number 9, Mother Love Bone with Apple. Apple by Mother Love Bone. I know I talked about this album a couple years ago as my super secret review during the end of Alternative Week 2010, and it's still available here on this channel. And I can't say enough about this release because this is grunge music's Sermon on the Mount, for the most part. Because Andy Wood speaks and sings as though he is behind a pulpit at a church and he is preaching the good news that is Andy Wood. I say it that way because nothing he's really pushing on you is any way religious. However, it feels like you're in the presence of a deity whenever you're listening to this record, and it certainly is a quote-unquote God experience. Andy's electricity, his energy, and just his absolute charisma are the highlights of this release, mixed with fantastic songwriting, good interweaving melodies, and a fantastic variety that spans the entire length of this album. This is one of those grunge releases that many people don't know about, and it's really a shame because it's also one of the absolute best that the grunge catalog has to offer. And also because of this, and because of Andy Wood's subsequent demise prior to the album even being released, we got the tribute band Temple of a Dog, which is the only tribute band that I know of that has ever scored a hit that was as major as Hunger Strike was whenever it was released. And also because of the band, we have Pearl Jam. So Mother Love Bone's impact on musical history is incredibly important. So if you liked any of the bands that I mentioned after that, wow, then you definitely owe yourself a favor to listen to Mother Love Bone's Apple. Number 8, Fear of a Blank Planet by Porcupine Tree. Some may ask, why not in absentia? Fear of the Blank Planet is the real deal, the real package for me. Whenever you consider the massive epic directly in the middle of the album, you just cannot begin to imagine what this album is going to be centered around, what it's going to be about. It's all about a culture that has been anesthetized by prescription drugs, by television, and by the internet, by constant distractions, so to speak, things that make us lazy, things that make us unwell. Now, of course, there's other tracks on there that are able to boast other things, such as Sleep Together, which is just kind of funny. My Ashes, once again, shows Steven Wilson's softer side, and the use of electronic music is not as highly done on this album as in albums previous, especially in the 1990s, whenever he was using mainly programmable drums. But it's something that does make a little bit of an appearance. The keyboards are very lavish on this. I really enjoy that. And once again, I can't say enough about Anesthetized. That's just a fantastic track. It's, another one of these lengthy 17-minute long songs divided into 3 parts that just has opus written all over it. And wow, does it really deliver. Number 7, The Bath / Leaving Your Body Map duality of albums by the band Model Into the Well. Toby Driver and the boys decided to put out 2 different albums at the latter part of the 1990s that was able to showcase their avant-garde stylings. And Leaving Your Body Map and Bath really were able to show that and showcase it exquisitely. These are albums that really have a lot to offer many unconventional music listeners, and that's why avant-garde really has a limited appeal. However, those who like avant-garde don't just like it, they pretty much worship it. There's enough creativity and uniqueness on both of these albums to really keep you involved. There's enough beauty to really seduce a casual listener in, while at the same time there's enough chaos and just random song structure to make you feel like that this band just decided to astral project and write music as they were in the clouds, having that out-of-body experience. Which is kind of ironic considering one of the tracks is called Birth Pains of Astral Projection, but I'm pretty sure that's just a coincidence. These are hard to find as well. They are definitely an eBay album. However, if you can find them, definitely give them a try. And don't get just one. You gotta get both. Number 6 is The Mighty Death, Death with Symbolic. Symbolic is, for me, the quintessential Death release. Even though The Sound of Perseverance was first and does contain some amazing work, the album that preceded it, Symbolic, just from the get-go, just from the opening riff, you knew that this was going to be something completely and totally amazing. Not to mention different than what you heard beforehand. As the 90s really started to progress and come closer to the midway point, you definitely could tell that Chuck wanted to explore with a little bit more progression. He wanted to do something that was a little bit different than what Death was doing. He wanted to go outside the box a little bit and do some different things with his music, while at the same time kind of keeping it within the same style, exploring with more clean singing, or just not singing at all, which is of course where Control Denied really came in. And with Symbolic, you got that aggression, you got that rage, you got those deathy vocals that have all the intellect in the world, but at the same time are delivered with just such raw emotion and passion that you just have to respect it. You got the crushing riffs, you got the often covered songs, such as Symbolic, such as Crystal Mountain. Damn, it's a mammoth of an album, it's a mammoth of a beast. Respect. Number 5, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son by Iron Maiden, the first band to be on here twice. Now, even though Brave New World is fantastic, and even though Number of the Beast is a Stone Cold classic, Seventh Son will always be the top spot as far as my Iron Maiden collection is concerned. This is a semi-conceptual release that also has just some of the most unique environments that you're going to hear on an Iron Maiden album. Keyboards were infused into this release, and Bruce sounds probably the best that I've ever heard him. He's not necessarily having to employ the air raid siren every 5 seconds or go to unseen notes that maybe not even Mariah Carey could hit. No, instead it's just a really solid performance all the way around, and what the strength is here is in the songwriting alongside his vocal performance. You just gotta love tracks like Moonchild. That's all that really needs to be said. Can I Play with Madness? You know, I'm speechless just thinking about the album. Just watch my review of it. I'm about ready to shit my pants. Number 4 is Dirt by Alice in Chains. Now, of course, a lot of you have seen the Dirt video that I did, and you know that I find it to be one of the most perfect albums of all time. And in the alternative world, that's absolutely true. The grunge world, this is probably one of the front runners right alongside Mother Love Bone. They're definitely not in a tie. Dirt definitely wins. Alice in Chains was just the masters of dark and brooding environments for grunge. They were the most metal of all of the grunge bands, and also the most depressed. Lane Staley's vocals on this album just really bleed out onto you, almost as though he is really professing and prophesizing his own demise, thanks to heroin. You can definitely tell where depression can really take you, and you can tell where madness is not that far behind. With such quotes from the song Dirt, such as, "I want you to scrape me off the walls and go crazy like you made me." Oh yeah, the dude was definitely a wordsmith, and if he was one thing, also, he was deadly fucking honest. And also, unfortunately, deadly fucking serious. Number 3, Opeth with Blackwater Park, the second band to be on here twice. Of course, I teased at this a little bit earlier, but now it's time to get into the ball game. Blackwater Park was number 2 for a while, but then whenever you sit there and think about it, you start to realize that this is the album. This is the quintessential album. Some may say Ghost Reveries, I say Blackwater Park. Some may say My Arms Your Hearse, or they may say Morning Rise, I say Blackwater Park. The reason why, is it because it's one of the more popular albums in their discography? No. Is it because it's the first album of theirs that I got? Actually, no, not that either. These guys have been my favorite band for so long that it doesn't even really make sense for that to be the reason. It's because this is a really complete album. It's one that really, from the very first moment of it to the very last one, just commands your attention. The title track, Blackwater Park, is one of the most powerful and just fantastic tracks in Opeth's discography. It's fantastic. And whenever you consider all the others that this album is able to embody, such as Harvest or The Leper Affinity, The Drapery Falls, Dirge for November, just to name a few, damn. This is a laundry list of just badass tracks that have the typical blend that you would expect from the progressive death metal heroes, Opeth. It is able to incorporate those thunderous, monstrous, deathy vocals that Mike just is able to emanate from himself almost effortlessly. And then, almost as though a total curveball, out come the cleans. And the cleans shine forth here with radiant beauty that even eclipsed Still Life. And I found Still Life's clean patterns to be absolutely magnificent. Damn. I'm almost out of breath just talking about this album. I love it, but if you want to know more, check out the review and the Opeth discography that I did. Number 2, The Mantle by Agalloch. Now, my aforementioned friend Rob and I had a debate on which one was better. I say The Mantle, he says Ashes Against the Grain. I like The Mantle more because of the atmosphere. The atmosphere on this album is not unlike the atmosphere on Ashes Against the Grain. Both atmospheres are absolutely fantastic and picturesque. However, I see a lot more vividly whenever I listen to The Mantle. I also love the songcraft on this a lot more. Man, the songcraft with songs such as In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion is just absolutely monstrous. That's one of those tracks that is really of underground metal legend. If you've heard of Agalloch, you've heard of In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion. If you haven't heard of Agalloch, you might still know about that song. It's kind of one of those weird things. If you haven't heard of Agalloch and you haven't heard that song, make an appointment. I also like the fact that I can really visualize scenes in my head whenever I listen to this stuff, especially the Hawthorne passage. I kind of imagine myself walking through a snowstorm, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit. And I'm trying to reach a cabin that is kind of out in the woods somewhere in a very Vinder-style fashion. It's almost eerie. I also love the fact that this is a band that is able to embrace atmosphere. It's able to be harsh, but it's also able to be very, very quiet. You have to love that. And that is the reason why it is number 2 on this list. And of course, number 1 almost needs no introduction. It had been prophesized by the review that I did it